in studying different countries in Africa about democracy, and Ghana is actually the fourth country I've been to after Mozambique, Botswana, Liberia, and my students and I were here for the elections in 2012, and we saw your campaigning. I attended one of your rallies.
Okay.
And so I'm a little familiar with it. Now I'm continuing the second part of the project, which is working on a documentary about democracy in Africa, and you're an important part of that here, particularly in the most recent election, but also for some time. I also spoke to former President Kufuor the other day and had an interview with him. So now I'd just like to ask you a little bit about, could you give me your sense of where democracy in Ghana is today?
Democracy is actually a very exciting moment, because we have been campaigning. My tradition, okay, we introduced the concept of democratic government and self-government when we formed the first mass political, modern political party in 1947. And since then we have been trying to see if we could move the democracy forward. And it's been ups and downs, mostly downs with the military interactions and things. But since 1992 we've been in the Fourth Republic, and so far, touch wood, okay, it's actually shown that Ghanaians really do, as they showed in the referendum, appreciate the thing about being governed by the democratic process. In 1992 we had an election which, after the presidential election, we refused to get involved and boycotted the parliamentary side because the amount of rigging that was going on at that time, we didn't have the capacity to resist. Since then, a lot of improvements have been made. In the year 2000, we were able in this country for the very first time to change the government through the ballot box, so that was a huge step forward. In 2008, there was another very, very closely run election. At that time we were in government, and with just some 40,000 odd votes out of 9.5 million, okay, we surrendered the office and gave it to our opponents. And then in 2012 we went back to the elections again. As you said, your students were here, you saw the vibrancy of the whole electoral process, the way the Ghanaians are involved in it. Unfortunately, we noticed something within that election which gave us cause for concern, okay, which was to suggest that the results that were being announced did not reflect what we felt was really happening and what should have been happening. And our people were so aggrieved afterwards that there was a moment when the slightest spark could have lit a fire here. And you know that Africa has been set back so much by challenged elections, by elections that people have considered unfair and therefore have challenged in the streets and through violence. And we really didn't want that to happen here. We were able to hold back our followers and stop any attempt at violence and get them to agree that we would contest the election result in the courts. We had 21 days in which to actually put together a case, and fortunately we were well enough organized to be able to put together a very good case, which we are now contesting through the courts. So this whole business, we feel, strengthens it. We feel that it will help not only Ghana. If in Ghana you had a situation where people started to feel that their vote was irrelevant, that the result was always preordained, then your democracy will have a real setback. People will not bother again, and at some stage there will be some different way of changing governments. But if through this court process we're showing that we are strengthening the capacity by strengthening the institutions that are involved in protecting the democracy, it's good for Ghana, and inshallah it will be good for Africa as well.
Mr. Chairman, there's those who say that the challenge, for example, to the election would have an impact on the perception that Ghana is the strongest democracy in Africa. From your answer that you just gave, I take that you disagree with that.
I agree that it will have an impact on the perception of Ghana as having the strongest democracy, in that it will strengthen that perception. Because if Ghana in Ghana we can take an election result to court and petition against the result, and God willing, actually win that matter in the court and have a reversal, that can only be a real strengthening of the democratic process. Then people will realize you don't have to resort to violence with elections. You can actually use the institutions, and that must strengthen all the institutions of democracy, and that must strengthen Ghana's leadership role in the democratic process.
Mr. Chairman, can you see this happening in another West African country which has institutions so strong as to use the court to arbitrate an election result? Can you imagine that happening anywhere else?
I know in Nigeria they have challenged in the courts before. And in Nigeria, the courts the last time ruled that there had been some irregularities, but they were not of such sufficiency as to really affect the result. So the Nigerian courts have shown that they were willing to consider a petition of this nature seriously. Now we are hoping that we have actually been able to bring enough evidence to court, and then we wait for the judges to show that they have the capacity to also to judge it, and if they should find that indeed we have got the evidence, give the ruling that ties in with the evidence. And if they do that, as I said, it has to be to the good of Ghana.
You see this then as a very positive effect, both inside Ghana as well as in the region outside?
I do, yes, I do. I think it's a real strengthener.
What is the major gist, just for my documentary, the major gist of the challenge that the plaintiff has brought into the courts at this stage? Broadly,
I mean, we've got a number, in fact, we've got about 24 different areas where we're challenging the results. But the critical ones are that we're bringing evidence that there was overvoting, that there were more votes declared than there were ballot papers issued at about some 1,800 polling stations, which if the court agrees and then the court allows what has happened before, what the law said before, that where you have overvoting, you cancel the results, and the courts actually have that law applied, that they cancel the results, it will mean, that by itself would mean that John Mahama would not be president, and that there should be another one. Then we're also challenging, because the laws of our country, in order to strengthen the whole process, with this year we went in for a biometric register. And then we insisted that for the biometric register to work, you must be verified biometrically by your fingerprints before you are allowed to vote. And that if you are not verified, you may not vote. And again, where voting occurred where people were not biometrically verified, then results at that polling station are also cancelled. Again, if the laws apply strictly on that basis, then in fact there will be a reversal of the decision. There are a number of other things as well, but those are two of the critical ones.
Do you think the biometric registration is a positive effect on advancing democracy in Ghana?
I think it's a step in the right direction. What we have to look at now is that we have to work out how we can do it so that we have complete faith in what is happening. See, the problem that we have is that we monitored the registration and we didn't have any quarrel or argument with what happened during the registration. However, the end result is that we've got some 14 million registered voters out of a population of 25 million. This means that 14 million, which is above 50% of your people, are above the age of 18. Now, that is not correct. We know that from the census, okay, and the way the age structure is built, that 50% of our population is below the age of 15. So how can you then have more than 50% as your registered voters? So questions like that we need to really address as we move forward. But it's a good step. It's a step in the right direction. It's something that we need to continue to move forward towards strengthening.
That's not a part of the challenge in court, though.
No, it's not.
But it's an issue.
Well, there's an issue about the whole register because different numbers kept on coming up. So, but it's not a major part. It's just a part of to show that the whole thing was not properly conducted.
Mr. Chairman, I know you're not a government official, but I'd like to ask you to try to address this question of citizen participation in democracy in Ghana and versus political leadership. How would you describe what the citizens of Ghana look for when they are practicing democracy as they go about their part of being good citizens?
It's a very difficult question to answer. It really is a very, very difficult question to answer because since my involvement in politics, I have in my involvement in trying to advance the cause of democracy, I don't believe that, I know that the elections are a critical and major part of the democratic process. But per se, elections by themselves do not make democracy. There's so many other things that go into a proper working democracy. There's so many other institutions that form a part of your democracy, institutions that must be properly strengthened to do that which they have to do, like the law. Okay, our judges, our whole law courts must be properly strengthened. And also civil society, okay, has a real role to play. And I continue to have questions about whether in fact civil society is really playing the role it's supposed to play. But my great fear is that if we're not careful, you will develop a political class, who work towards keeping people out of politics. So the persons who can really make a contribution towards governance are kept away because of the gauntlet that they have to run to be able to serve. You have a bit of it in the United States. In the US now, if you're going to be nominated for the Supreme Court or nominated for this department or whatever, the whole process that you go through before you are, the Congress gives you its blessing, can put many people off the whole thing of, no, there are other ways for me to serve. I don't have to be in public life, And we're doing that, but also doing it very negatively. The whole business we have here of the level of insults and the level of debate. Okay, if you're a serious person, or too many of our serious people, feel that if they put themselves into the path of such indignity, they're not helping themselves, they're not helping their families, and they would rather not get involved. And then if you're not careful, then it really becomes only those who are willing, who have like myself, the skins of elephants and crocodiles, will be willing to go forward into this thing, who will be willing to take all the abuse and the rest that you suffered. We need to take abuse out of the competitive system. We need somehow to start advancing the whole thing about you are choosing leaders, and you're choosing leaders based upon ideas and based upon capacity to deliver. Okay, we're young, but hopefully we won't go too far down the wrong road. We will be able to start going, making our choices based upon reasoning, proper reasoning, rather than some of the things we're doing now. But that's also a function of education. If your population is as uneducated as our population is, then you don't really expect them to be able to make some of the decisions they need to make, because they don't have the capacity to be able to find out what the real concerns are and what the issues are and what the issues actually mean. So they rely upon what they're told by this person or that person instead of being able to find out something for themselves. So
your population is among the most educated on the continent, relatively.
Supposedly. But then when you say educated, I mean, I saw something yesterday where it said the same thing. But education is not about numbers of people who go to school. Education is much more about it. There's a quality of education. There's no point saying that you have 100 people educated, and then out of the 100, 99 come out through school and not unable to read or write. Then they're not educated. So we need to do something about the quality of our education.
Well, I'd like to follow up on that in the following sense. When I was here with my students in December, I did some man in the street or students on the campus interviews, and I asked people to tell me, to make a distinction for me between the two top political parties on the issue of education and jobs, economics. almost to the person, no one could tell me the difference between your party and the ruling party.
Well, then you must have been here early, because I think by the end of the election, one of the major promises that we were making, one of the major policies that we had, which was a free state education.
I understood the policy.
Okay, had been.
I understood your campaign,
Yes.
But the people I interviewed, this is 3 days before the election.
And they still
They
didn't
could not tell a
realize.
student or a person in the street, if I asked, what does, the
MPP stand for,
stand
and
for,
what is the
or what the
NDC?
NDC, they could not articulate it. They liked mostly the personalities or the affiliated with the parties, but not necessarily with issues.
That is that's what I'm saying. We have to grow our politics so that it really becomes much more debate about the issues, and people start being educated to be able to understand that it's issue based. You cannot have a section of the population, okay, a region, almost 100% against a political party, okay, because there must be people within that region who basically share the viewpoints of that political party that they vote against and that they are against. Okay, they're voting against the party because of things other than real issues.
Is there polarization in Ghana that goes beyond the different party labels?
Well, the country at the moment is split pretty evenly. I mean, I think between the two major parties, and each of the parties is basically national, but still insufficiently national to really say that we are dividing because of people see us as right of center and see the opposition, see our opponents as left of center. I don't think we've really got to that sort of reasoning yet.
Is there polarization based on tribalism or the remnants or what's left over of tribalism?
It's a part of it. It's a part of it, but it's also it's a whole mix of different things as well. It's also about what happened with your parents, what happened with other elements of your history, and it's tribal also maybe in terms of how do people look upon a particular group of people from historical, from way back, okay, their attitudes to certain people.
Has your party done any polling during this period of time of the court case, and what is it showing? You might summarize it.
Well, I think basically what we're seeing is that the country is on hold. Okay, everybody, we would say, our polling would support us that there is a majority out there, okay, that were very disappointed by the results and felt that the results did not reflect their choice, and so they feel that their chance to reverse it is within this court case, and they're looking forward to the court case turning the result around.
I'd like to go to the second part of this perspective on democracy in Ghana today. You've certainly commented quite extensively on citizen participation. I'd like to talk to you a little bit now about quality of political leadership. Could you comment on where you think Ghana stands today in the quality of political leadership? And I'm not speaking just about your party or the ruling party. I'm speaking just generally what is articulated to the people in terms of leadership.
Well, I think our political leadership is basically it's a reflection of the society. The quality of our political leadership is basically the same sort of quality that we have in business leadership. The same thing that we've in religious leadership, in educational leadership. Again, I think in terms of politics, we're very young in making a democracy work and using the tools of democracy and trying to strengthen the democracy. It was 1992 till now. In fact, it was 2000, because up until 2000, the vestiges of the military government were still very, very strong. So really, we had about, let's say, 15 years of functioning democracy. So the leadership is still developing. It's still developing. I mean, there are serious inequalities. We all talk about Ghana has been blessed, but you will find it difficult to be able to get the quality that you need around all the areas in which you need them. Because government in this country, unfortunately, is very big. When you take not just the central government, but also get down to local government, and the leaders that you need, we need time to really build people up, and also build up the commitment that they have to public service.
Just brought up the whole issue of centralization, decentralization, local leadership, and so on. Do you think that too much power is concentrated in the hands of the president?
Oh, definitely.
And what would you do about it?
I find it difficult to work out what can be done about it, because you can regulate to have less power in the hands of the president, which is not necessarily a bad idea, but at the same time, it's not just the power that is regulated to the president, it's also the power that the citizens give the president. It's the authority that we bestow upon the president or the executive in any particular situation. I mean, your district chief executive does not have an awful lot of power, but if you see the district chief executive in a rural setting, the amount of power that they command is way above, almost above what the president has, but because the people give them that amount of authority.
Then why wouldn't it be better for the people to directly elect them? Are these the ones that are appointed by the president? I'm not mistaken.
These are the ones appointed by the president.
So why wouldn't that be something that you would relegate to local constituencies? If they're going to select a mayor, a municipal executive, why shouldn't they elect them?
Well, the party's long-term policy or medium-term policy is a commitment to elected local officials, but the debate continues always about when to let it go. And also the other thing is, obviously, I mean, in these situations, if you are the one if you're the one not in office, it's easy for you to continue to advance the arguments about the decentralization and letting it go. But if you are the one in office, then you are much more focused on making sure that your programs are really pushed down to the district level. So you're less eager to enact the legislation. But there is ultimately, I mean, it's not just having a leader. You've also got to build up certain other institutions to support the leadership down there. Specifically, you need to build up the capacity for proper management, to make sure that we have enough accountants, enough professional accountants who if they indulge in certain activities, lose their professional standing, and then find that their whole lives are affected by, as a repercussion of what they do wrong. I mean, there's a lot of things that we need to do to strengthen things, to be able to make sure that when you do the decentralization, you will function better than you are doing now.
As you look, sir, across again your region, West Africa, do you see examples of things going on in other countries that you would be interested in seeing take place in Ghana? Say anywhere from Sierra Leone to Liberia to Togo to Nigeria. Are there things that are encouraging elsewhere in the region?
I think the most encouraging thing is that the whole region basically is now out of the hands of the military. Apart from one or two places, we no longer have military governments. Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Benin, Togo, Liberia, all of them have elected.
You probably should pause here.
This is unusual.
Either you got a very powerful alarm or that emergency vehicle is stuck. What is that? It's moving slowly. It's not much of an emergency.
Trying to get through the traffic, which is built up.
Traffic, and people aren't listening to us. Okay, gentlemen, we'll keep rolling.
I was saying, I mean, if you look at the number of our sister countries
democracy.
ECOWAS countries, which now have elected civilian governments in place, all more or less all on the same sort of level of development that we are, same sort of commitment, towards trying to make sure that we can build upon it. That is encouraging, and we need to really strengthen the whole business. For instance, in Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, when Gbagbo refused to hand over, on our part, we were adamant, very, very strong, that he should let go.
Through ECOWAS.
And we pushed it. I'm talking about our party. We were stronger than our government in trying to make sure that he obeyed the will of the people. And so I think if we can, all of us, keep reinforcing each other to try and make it work, then we can try and pick up little bits. When we see somebody doing something well, try and pick up from there. But it's picking up, but it's not there yet.
Do you think the president for life is gone forever from West Africa, if not fully from the continent?
I forget who it was, James Bond or whatever, who said never say never. So I can't say it's gone forever, because there's still many who would like to, enjoy it. You can see examples around you.
As you look at Ghana, could you ever see the military? I don't want to ask you for never again, but military rule returning to this country?
Yes, but hopefully not for long. I think if it happened, it may actually just be maybe a short intervention, which would then quickly be, hopefully quickly be set aside, and the country return to civilian government again. But I don't think we can turn around now and say that our democracy is so entrenched, our civilian government is so well entrenched that it's impossible to consider a military government. But I say that also in the knowledge. I remember in the 1970s in Britain, which is one of the strongest democracies in the world, they were then talking about the possibility of a military coup, even in Britain. So you can never be too far away from this. You should always, in civilian government, be aware, that it's also something which is on the table, and that you should do everything you can possibly do to make sure that it is taken off the table.
Could you think of some of the circumstances that, hypothetical, that might lead to that situation?
Well, for instance, if this last election here, with the feeling that people had that it had been a fix and had been robbed, if the election result had been allowed to stand unchallenged, then I think the next time we went to an election, you would have found that people were not quite as willing to go and queue from the night before to vote. That there will be a lot more people who will feel that the voting process was a waste of their time. And when that feeling becomes stronger and stronger, that people start to feel that it really doesn't matter how I vote, the person who's going to win has already been determined. Therefore, I don't have any say in choosing who is going to be my government, who are going to be the leaders of the country. Then at that stage, then it becomes easier for an adventurer to turn around and say, well, let me set this thing aside, and then we start again. So, for that respect too, I think that the whole thing about our going to court to challenge it, pushes that further back, because hopefully, whatever happens, people will feel that this democracy can be made to work if we, all of us, get behind it and pledge to make it work.
And they see the institutions of the society
working to strengthen it. Yes, yes.
That's very encouraging. In terms of the outcome of the Supreme Court, which I assume is going to come sometime this summer, sir.
Well, I'm very hopeful that by the end of June we will have a result. I think we are now into the last maybe 10 days or whatever, 2 weeks of the cases being presented and argued, and then the judges will have 2 weeks in which to go and come to a decision and come out with what their decision is.
Of the possible outcomes, of which there are probably 3 or 4, I mean, you probably have many others, and I'm sure you and your team have thought about this. What happens if the court rules in your favor?
What happens is that our candidate is then declared, what happens is that the court, having decided that these votes from here, because of the malpractices and criminal activities and illegalities, those votes are cancelled. Therefore, with those votes cancelled, President John Mahama is no longer the president, and that the Electoral Commission should go and do the figures again, taking in mind all the ones that have now been cancelled, and then declare the result that comes out of that, and then that result can be declared. Okay, the court can also rule that President John Mahama is not the president, but there should be some sort of new election, in which case there will be an acting president who is the speaker, who will then have 3 months in which to organize new elections.
Can the court declare that, or does it have to send something? Does everything have to go back to the EC, or can the court actually mandate such a thing?
I think the court can mandate the second, but the first one, I don't think the court has the power to declare so-and-so president. So that's why I'm saying if they decide that this is going to happen, that the presidency is going to go from one to the other, they will turn around and say, expunge these records, whatever is left, total them, and then come out with a declaration.
And then there's another possibility that neither candidate may have the 50%, and there would have to be a new poll.
If they find out how they can sort that out, yes. But at the moment, what we're saying is that the precedents that have been shown so far is that where these irregularities have occurred, the votes there have been cancelled. So if the court accepts that the irregularities have occurred, and then accepts that yes, the votes were cancelled, and therefore what is source for the goose is also source for the gander, then this is what will happen.
Is this the equivalence of a constitutional crisis there?
It depends how we handle it. It will be a constitutional challenge. It will be a constitutional opportunity. And if we handle it well, if we handle it badly, there might be some element of crisis. If we handle it well, it will come out, I believe, as a real strengthening. And then the new president, President Akufo-Addo, will have the challenge of trying to make sure that he brings the country together more tightly, unifies the country after such a declaration.
Would such a constitutional crisis be one of the probably premises for military intervention?
I hope not. I don't see because there will be a reason, there will be a way forward. It's only when you don't have a way forward that the military can try and justify getting themselves involved.
My final 2 questions, sir, is first, generally, what do you see as the greatest threats to democracy in Ghana?
Poverty and ignorance. Okay, poverty, because poverty is what allows people to influence the voting by money. Okay, and you have a level of poverty where if I promise you that I'm going to make your life better, if you give me 6 months, you'll see a huge improvement in your life. And then no, please, I can't wait 6 months. I'm really hungry now. Give me something today. Okay, and let the 6 months take care of themselves. Who knows if I'll be alive or dead in 6 months. Okay, so that level of poverty, which a lot of our people have to endure, means that I'm willing to accept something today and then do that which I know is against my own long-term interest, but I don't have the money to get past the next 2 days, or this will help me ease up the next few days. That, and then also ignorance, because through ignorance you don't really know what the issues are, you don't know how to examine the issues, and that is also a huge challenge to making a democracy work.
When I asked this question of people, and I was here in December, my students were here, often the issue of corruption came up as a great threat to democracy. If I asked the ordinary citizen, what's the greatest threat to democracy, they were more likely to say corruption.
I think corruption is the greatest threat that we have for the nation moving. And it's part. I think the thing about buying elections is part of the corrupt process, and part of the ignorance is how the corruption can also thrive. I think if we can get over some of the maybe it's chicken and egg. Before you can get rid of the poverty, you got to get rid of the corruption. Before you can get rid of the corruption, you got to get rid of some of the poverty.
But it's not poor people who the corruption.
It is poor people who feel that they have different priorities. So that if you go to a poor person and say that this man has stolen X much from government to come and buy your vote, don't vote for them. Okay, they'll still perhaps vote for them because of something that they get today. Okay? Even knowing that what you're saying about the person is entirely true. Okay, so you cannot actually deal with the corruption because of the levels of poverty, and it's also because of poverty. Some of the corruption is allowed. That you have a general level of some sort of tolerance of certain levels of corruption.
Does the NPP support the existence of an anti-corruption commission?
Yes, within our manifesto, we have some very, very strong things on how we're going to deal with corruption. Because once you're in government, that is the one that makes sure that you cannot perform. Okay? You cannot perform if you have the levels of corruption that we have seen in this country. And it leads to all sorts of unhappiness as well, ultimately, and it destabilizes. It's true, it destabilizes. Corruption is a threat to democracy, because that is also something that invites the military to step in, because when they start to feel that these politicians are taking everything in the country for themselves and that there's no benefit to the country, let's move, and if we move, we'll be popular, then they feel they can move.
Mr. Chairman, this is the 50th anniversary of the AU, or its predecessor, the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, and now African Union. What's your position, your party's position on the AU in terms of what its purpose is, what its prospects are, what role it should play in the future in Africa?
We welcome anything that strengthens Africa's position. We think that Africa's position will be much stronger if all of us are committed to the democratic process. The AU in the past, we feel, has been weakened by the ways in which it has handled internal conflicts internal to its member states. It's allowed persons whose hands are bloodied with anti-democratic governance to actually continue to sit at the table with the heads of state. We would like to see an AU that is actually committed to not just African unity, but quality African unity. And part of that quality is that we're committed to a certain type of governance. And that is the people who practice that governance who are then a part of that union, that are trying to get things together. And that if you do not practice that type of government, if you decide that you are going to come in and you're going to be a military dictatorship, you're going to be president for life and things like this, you have no part in what we are trying to create within Africa. And we feel that we can start to get that sort of commitment in the AU, we'll be able to move much more rapidly towards being able to do things like easing border restrictions, easing movement of people, easing movement of goods, which is, I mean, we sit also in the sub-region with ECOWAS, over 250 million people within ECOWAS. If we could really lower all the restrictions of movement of goods and things, think what a market we would have. Think of what we could do with such a market, and so. But to do that, you need to have all the governments committed basically to the same vision of development, the same type of governance, and then when we can move it. So AU is not meeting, the aspirations that we would like to see it dedicating itself to. Which is not to say that we want it out, but maybe the thing is to strengthen it and then to get more people agreeing that it needs to have quality membership, not just quantity.
And the leadership of AU and the bureaucratic structure, is that, are you pleased with the direction they're going?
You cannot be. I mean, you cannot also be that pleased when you find, okay, that here we have a society to which we all belong. We wanted to have play a real role, and then you find that only 2 or 3 people are actually funding it, okay, and then you won't have a voice in it, and you're not funding part of the funding process. So we need to have a better commitment by African countries towards it as well, because then they can really strengthen the whole management as well of
Do you
it.
see the day when, say, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, because of the collective economic or population or geographic power, can bring discipline to the continent of Africa?
Very difficult. Very difficult. I mean, I think when the OAU was being started, it was Nyerere who said that he was not going to have any, knight in white shiny armor or whatever coming and saying that, so around, everybody come around me, I am the white knight, the knight of unity.
Is he talking about
at the time? Yes. Okay, so I think, you've got this commitment also to these boundaries.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
But I think we can have a stronger voice. I mean, that was the whole thing about NEPAD. I think that NEPAD was trying to get that look, countries that have better run economies and have better run governance should be taking a stronger role and preaching, being seen to be in a leadership position. So ultimately, I think that can also come.
Would your party be in favor of a common currency in ECOWAS countries?
We were moving towards trying to get that when we were in office. I think the bank or whatever, part of the thing was set up, was actually based in Accra, but the convergence criteria, okay, is something that you have to move on, and also you have to observe the lessons. Okay, Europe has just been trying it. Okay, in Europe, we've seen the challenges that they're facing. Okay, states coming together like that is not the same thing as the United States of America. That was actually basically one country. They have one set of laws, one language, basically. Okay, and so it's a lot. Yes, yeah, but it's a lot easier for them to, But even with the Civil War, the Civil War, they tried to bring a second currency. Okay, but very quickly they accepted that the northern currency was a real dollar, not what was in the Confederate dollar, and that can work. But when you've got historical things, so we should not. We don't have to rush to lumber ourselves with more problems than we need to. There are enough problems in trying to make sure that we deal with the customs barriers. There's no problems in just trying to make sure that if you are trucking goods from here to somewhere in Nigeria, you can cross the borders without, not letting hindrance,
You have a visa-less travel in ECOWAS, but if you were going to South Africa tomorrow,
you must get a visa.
So it's not on the continent as a whole. Is that something AU has to address eventually?
It needs to work at it. It's part of the things that, the free movement of peoples and goods. Okay, but it's not going to happen immediately because of the different levels of development, the different complexities in the different countries.
What about the receipt and the employment of aid from the West? Could AU play a role of being the conduit for that, or does it still have to go country by country?
It'll go country by country. I think what you're finding with aid is that they want to get closer and closer to where the aid money is being spent. It's, in Ghana, we had got to the situation where the aid people were dealing directly with NGOs. It was in our time of government that we finally got them to come back again to say, no, we're sufficiently bypassing the government. Okay, that we're sufficiently in control and that we're not eating the money, so you bring it to the central government pot and then it will be distributed. If you have a particular thing that you want to support, we will help you to make sure that your money goes towards that, but not you decide, which NGO you're going to pass your money through.
How is the Chinese role in Africa today different from that which the West played? Even, I mean, after colonialism, is there a different thing? Are they imposing fewer restrictions on aid or on concessions? What's different about the Chinese and Western countries?
We need infrastructure. Infrastructure costs big money. You want to build a super highway, 4-lane highway between here and Kumasi. It's going to cost you $600 million, $700 million. You don't have that sort of money, and you cannot. The banks, the Western banks, are not really interested in helping you to access 700 million, okay, because they're worried about this or that, whatever. So in the end, you can go to the World Bank, okay, and then you can go to some of the countries. Too many of the countries now no longer do bilateral aid; they do multilateral aid. They say, do long-term things. Go to the World Bank. You go to the World Bank says, we'll lend you $20 million a year. $20 million a year says you're going to build that road over 35 years. But as you're building it, it's falling apart. You know, you go to the Chinese, you say we want to borrow $700 million. The Chinese will sit down and then they will drive a bargain with you. We'll lend you the money on these terms and these conditions. If you can like those terms and conditions, take their money. Okay, if you cannot bargain with them and get something that you feel is useful to yourself, don't go there. Nobody's forcing you to go to the Chinese. And they drive a very hard bargain, including bringing their own labor. So you want to build a road to give jobs to your people. They might lend you the money to build the road, but they say they're going to bring even their own laborers. You know, and that's, you know, so you've got to really know exactly what it is you are willing to bargain for and what their benefits are. If you know it and you go in there and you bargain well, then why can't you get a situation that benefits both sides? And it gives you at least another string to your bow. At least you can get something going, which maybe you cannot get going because your other sources will give it to you in dribs and drabs, and you'll never be able to finish what you need to finish. Because we also have 4-year terms. In 4 years, I must have something to show, you know. And you know.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. If there's anything you'd like to add.
Oh, I'm happy to see that you're taking an interest in this. I hope that whatever comes out, you'll share it with us. Okay, I mean, one of the problems that we have in Africa is lots of studies are made of things in African, and then the results are kept outside and not made available to the people who could actually benefit from using them.
Well, my original motivation, I must admit, was selfish, and that is Americans, my fellow Americans, knew such little about Africa. The only thing they knew were the stereotypic things: safaris, jungles, disease,
Tarzan and Jane,
Tarzan and Jane,
yeah.
and Idi Amin.
Yes.
Those are the most recognizable people from Africa, and this is serious.
Yes.
So, and I would like for people to know more about it, but I want them to have the positive attitudes about what is emerging here, and that it is not one country, it's a continent, it's 54 countries, and that there are several stages of progress toward involving people in their own governments. And this is the story I'm trying to.
Well, I think as you're telling that story, I think you have to make let them also know that Africa is the fastest growing continent, okay, and that you know the money is here, you know.